The retreat the battle scars on Lieutenant Marcus Kane's hands matched the ones carved into his soul. 3 days of brutal combat in the Kepler sector had left him hollow, his squadron reduced to ghosts and memories. The medical officer had prescribed rest, but Marcus knew better than to seek solace among the living. Their pitying glances and whispered condolences would only deepen the wound. Instead, he requisitioned access to the Drifter, a decommissioned cargo hauler floating in the shadow of Titan's abandoned mining stations. The ship's registry listed it as salvage, stripped of everything valuable, maintaining only basic life support. Perfect for a man who wanted to disappear. Marcus guided his fighter through the hauler's cavernous docking bay, the magnetic clamps engaging with a satisfying thunk. The silence that followed felt like a benediction. No cum chatter, no engine hum, no dying friends calling his name over static-filled channels. Just the whisper of recycled air and the distant creak of cooling metal. He powered down his fighter and stepped into the empty bay. Emergency lighting cast everything in amber shadows, transforming the vast space into a cathedral of solitude. His footsteps echoed as he made his way to the crew quarters, past corridors lined with stripped wall panels and empty equipment mounts. The captain's quarters still contained a basic bunk and a small viewport overlooking the void. Marcus dropped his gear and stared out at the stars, their cold light offering no comfort. He'd seen too many of those lights snuffed out in the past few days. Good people reduced to expanding clouds of plasma and debris. Sleep came in fragments, haunted by the faces of Squadron Leader Torres and young pilot Hendricks. In his dreams, they asked why he'd survived when they hadn't. Marcus had no answer then, and he had none now. What he didn't know was that his arrival had disturbed another resident of the Drifter. In the ship's forgotten spaces, between bulkheads and behind access panels, something stirred. Ancient eyes opened in the darkness, studying the newcomer with a mixture of curiosity and caution. Zephyr had been hiding in the derelict vessel for nearly a lunar cycle, using her people's gift to remain undetected. The last of the whisper touched. She possessed abilities that made her invisible to sensors and nearly imperceptible to conscious minds. Her kind had mastered the art of existing between thoughts, in the spaces where awareness flickered. She had come to study humanity, to understand the species that had driven hers to the edge of extinction. But this human was different from the warriors she'd observed. This one radiated pain rather than aggression, loneliness rather than conquest. As Marcus settled into uneasy sleep, Zephyr moved through the shadows, drawn by an emotion she hadn't expected to find in a human heart. Genuine sorrow. The watcher Marcus woke to absolute silence, the kind that pressed against his eardrums like deep water. For a moment, he'd forgotten where he was, expecting to hear the familiar sounds of the carrier's night cycle. Instead, only the faint hum of life support reminded him he wasn't floating dead in space. He'd been aboard the Drifter for 3 days now, and the solitude was working its slow magic. The nightmares still came, but they felt distant, like echoes from another life. He'd established a routine. Wake, eat from his emergency rations, walk the empty corridors, stare out at the stars, sleep. Simple, peaceful, exactly what his fractured mind needed. What Marcus didn't realize was that he wasn't alone in his routine. Zephyr had begun to mirror his movements, staying always just beyond perception's edge. When he walked the corridors, she flowed through the ventilation shafts above. When he ate, she watched from the shadows of doorways. When he slept, she studied his face in the amber emergency lighting. Her people's empathic abilities allowed her to feel the edges of his emotions, and what she discovered challenged everything she'd been taught about humans. The textbooks spoke of a species driven by violence and conquest, of minds that gloried in destruction. But Marcus radiated something else entirely, a deep, aching compassion that had been wounded by war. She felt his grief for his fallen comrades, sharp and pure as a blade. She sensed his guilt, the way he carried their deaths like stones in his chest. Most surprising of all, she detected his fundamental gentleness, carefully hidden beneath layers of military discipline and masculine stoicism. On the fourth night, Zephyr made a mistake. Marcus had been talking in his sleep, mumbling apologies to ghosts, and she'd moved closer to hear. Her foot brushed against a loose floor panel, creating the softest whisper of sound. Marcus bolted upright, military instincts overriding exhaustion. "Who's there?" His voice cut through the darkness like a laser. He reached for the emergency light, bathing the small quarters in harsh white illumination. Zephyr pressed herself against the wall, her natural camouflage making her nearly invisible. But Marcus had the heightened awareness of a combat veteran. He'd heard something, and he wouldn't rest until he understood what. "I know someone's here," he said, his voice surprisingly calm. "I can feel it." The words sent a shock through Zephyr's system. Humans weren't supposed to be empathically sensitive. Yet somehow, this one had detected her presence through sheer instinct. She remained perfectly still, watching as Marcus slowly scanned the room. His eyes passed over her hiding spot twice, but something in his expression suggested he wasn't convinced by the emptiness he saw. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said softly. "I'm just tired of being alone." The admission hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. Zephyr felt her resolve wavering. This human was nothing like the monsters from her people's warnings. He was just a broken soul seeking connection in the vast emptiness of space. But she remained hidden, watching, waiting and wondering if loneliness might be the one thing that could bridge the gap between their species. The encounter Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was being observed. It had started as a prickle at the base of his skull, the kind of sensation that had kept him alive through countless battles. Someone or something was sharing his sanctuary aboard the drifter. He'd begun leaving small tests. A piece of food left on a table, a tool placed just so. Each morning, he'd find subtle signs that someone had been there. A crumb moved, a fingerprint on metal, evidence of a presence that vanished like mist whenever he investigated. "I know you're here," he said aloud as he prepared his evening meal. "I'm not sure what you want, but I'm not your enemy." In the shadows of the galley, Zephyr listened to his words with growing fascination. The human's emotional resonance had changed over the past few days. The sharp edges of grief were softening into something else, curiosity, even a tentative hope. He genuinely seemed to want contact, despite not knowing what he was inviting. Her own people would have considered such openness a fatal weakness. But Zephyr found herself drawn to Marcus's vulnerability. It took courage to reach out to an unknown presence, to offer trust without guarantee of safety. That night, she made a decision that would have horrified her ancestors. As Marcus settled into his bunk, she moved closer than ever before, allowing herself to become visible at the edge of his vision. Just a shadow among shadows, but present. Marcus turned his head slowly, and their eyes met across the darkened quarters. Zephyr's breath caught. His eyes weren't filled with the hatred she'd expected, but with wonder. They were kind eyes, tired but unafraid. In that moment, she realized that everything her people had taught her about humans was wrong. "Hello," Marcus said quietly, making no sudden movements. "I'm Marcus." She remained perfectly still, studying his face. His emotional field radiated curiosity and caution, but no malice. Against every instinct of her species, she stepped forward, into the light. Marcus's breath hitched as he saw her clearly for the first time. Tall and ethereal, with skin that seemed to absorb light and eyes that held the depth of ancient starlight. Beautiful, but unmistakably alien. "You're not human," he said, statement rather than question. Zephyr shook her head slowly. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate in his bones. I am the last of my kind. The whisper touched are no more. I'm sorry, Marcus said, and she could feel the sincerity in his words. I know what it's like to lose everyone. The simple empathy in his response shattered something inside her. This human understood loss as she did. He carried the weight of the dead as she carried the memory of her extinct people. Why are you here? Marcus asked gently. To study your species, she admitted. To understand why you destroyed mine. Marcus absorbed this without flinching. Did you find your answers? Zephyr looked into his eyes and saw reflected there the same loneliness that had driven her to the edge of existence. I found something I did not expect, she said. I found that we are not so different. In the silence that followed, two beings from different worlds recognized the kinship that transcended species, the bond of survivors, who had lost everything yet still chose to reach out across the void. The connection the revelation should have changed everything between them, but instead, it created a strange peace. Marcus and Zephyr began to share the same space with careful respect, like wounded animals learning to trust. She showed him how she moved through the ship's hidden spaces, the maintenance tunnels and forgotten chambers where she'd made her temporary home. He shared his rations and told her about his fallen squadron, his words painting pictures of people she'd never meet, but now mourned alongside him. Your people believed we were monsters, Marcus said one evening as they sat in the observation deck, watching the stars wheel slowly past. Maybe they were right about some of us. Zephyr studied his profile in the starlight. Through her empathic abilities, she could feel the self-doubt that gnawed at him. I have touched many human minds, she said carefully. Most are different from you. Different how? Louder, more chaotic, driven by impulses that create suffering. She paused, choosing her words. But not all. You carry something rare among your kind, the ability to feel others' pain as your own. Marcus laughed bitterly. That's not a gift. It's a curse. Perhaps. But it is also what makes you human in the best sense. She turned to face him fully. My people called your species the Devourers. We believed you consumed everything in your path, leaving only emptiness. But you you create connection even in the void. I couldn't save them, Marcus said quietly. Torres, Hendricks, Morrison, they trusted me to bring them home. And their deaths wounded you deeply because you loved them. Zephyr's voice carried gentle certainty. That love is why you grieve. That love is why you survive. Over the following days, their conversations deepened. Marcus learned about the Whisper Touched, a species that had lived in the spaces between thoughts, masters of empathy and connection. They'd been peaceful observers, documenting the emotional lives of other species across the galaxy. We thought we were safe in our hidden places, Zephyr explained. We underestimated humanity's ability to find what others cannot see. The war, Marcus said, understanding flooding through him. Your people got caught in the crossfire. Not crossfire. Deliberate targeting. Your military discovered our abilities and deemed us a threat. Her voice remained steady, but Marcus felt the ocean of grief beneath her words. We could feel lies, detect deception, read true intentions. In a galaxy built on secrets, we became dangerous. Marcus felt the weight of his species' actions settle on his shoulders. I'm sorry, he said, the words inadequate but heartfelt. You were not there. You did not choose this path. Zephyr reached out hesitantly, her fingers brushing his hand. But you carry the guilt as if you had. That is the burden of those who feel too much. The touch sent a shock through both of them. Marcus felt a warmth he hadn't experienced in years, while Zephyr gasped at the intensity of human emotion experienced directly. I can feel your memories, she whispered. The friends you lost, the battles you fought, The reasons you enlisted. Her eyes widened. You joined the military to protect people, not to conquer them. Fat lot of good it did, Marcus said, but there was less bitterness in his voice than before. More than you know, Zephyr replied. In all my observations, I have never encountered a human who radiates such pure compassion. You are proof that your species can be more than destroyers. In the growing trust between them, both began to heal from wounds they'd carried alone. The awakening their time together in the sanctuary of the Drifter was drawing to a close. Marcus had received word that his leave was ending, and he would soon be reassigned to a new squadron. The thought of returning to the war felt like stepping back into a nightmare, but duty called. I have to go, he told Zephyr as they sat in the ship's small hydroponics bay, where she'd been coaxing new life from abandoned growing pods. They need pilots. And you need to fight, she said, understanding in her voice. It is part of who you are. I don't want to leave you alone again. Zephyr's hand stilled on the green shoots she'd been tending. I am the last of my kind, Marcus. Alone is what I am. No, he said firmly. You're not alone anymore. You have me. She looked at him with eyes that held the light of dying stars. Your people will not accept me. I am the enemy. Then we'll make them understand. Together. The word hung between them, heavy with possibility. Zephyr had spent her entire life as an observer, watching from the shadows while others lived in the light. But Marcus offered her something she'd never dared to hope for, the chance to be part of something larger than survival. The military. Won't listen to one pilot, she said practically. Maybe not, but they'll listen to evidence. Marcus stood and began pacing, his tactical mind engaging. You know things about the war that no one else does. You've observed both sides, seen the truth behind the propaganda. That knowledge could save lives. And if they decide I'm too dangerous to live? Marcus stopped pacing and looked at her directly. Then they'll have to go through me first. The fierce protectiveness in his voice made Zephyr's breath catch. In all her years of observing emotions, she'd never been the target of such unwavering loyalty. Why? She asked. Why would you risk everything for someone you've known for days? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Because for the first time, since the war started, I feel like I'm fighting for something worth preserving. Not just territory or resources, but the possibility that different species can find common ground. And if we're wrong? If your people and mine are destined to destroy each other, then at least we'll have tried to build a bridge instead of burning one. Zephyr felt something shift inside her, a sensation she'd never experienced before. Hope, not just for survival, but for a future that transcended the limitations of their species. I will come with you, she said quietly, but not as a prisoner or a curiosity, as a partner. Marcus smiled, the first genuine expression of joy she'd seen from him. Partners, then, in whatever comes next. As they prepared to leave the Drifter, both knew they were embarking on something unprecedented. A human and the last of the Whisper touched, united by understanding and driven by hope. They would face suspicion, fear, and hatred from both sides of the conflict, but they would face it together, proving that even in the darkest void, connection could bloom. They carried within them the seeds of a new possibility, that empathy might triumph over fear, that understanding could bridge the gap between species, and that two beings from different worlds could find in each other not just companionship, but the strength to change the galaxy. The ship's engines hummed to life as they departed their sanctuary, carrying them toward an uncertain but shared future among the stars.